The autumn breeze carried the scent of pine trees as Gabriella Torres stepped off the local bus, her worn leather bag hanging from her shoulder. She had traveled 3 hours from her small hometown to reach this remote estate nestled in the mountains of Northern California. At 26 years old, she was taking a chance on a job advertisement that promised good pay and accommodation for a private cook position. What she needed most was a fresh start and the means to support her younger brother's college education. The driveway stretched endlessly before her, lined with towering oak trees that created a natural canopy overhead. Her heart beat faster with each step toward the magnificent stone mansion that emerged from the landscape like something out of a storybook. The architecture was a perfect blend of rustic charm and modern elegance, with large windows reflecting the golden afternoon sun and ivy climbing gracefully along the eastern wall. The first meeting. Lucas Whitmore was reviewing construction plans in his study when his housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson, announced the arrival of the new cook. He had conducted the interview over video call 2 weeks prior, but nothing had prepared him for the moment Gabriella walked into his office. She wore a simple navy dress that complemented her warm brown eyes, and her dark hair was pulled back in a practical braid. There was something genuine about her smile, something that made his usually guarded heart skip unexpectedly. "Mr. Whitmore, thank you for this opportunity," Gabriella said, extending her hand with quiet confidence. Her voice was soft but steady, revealing both nervousness and determination. Lucas rose from behind his desk, suddenly very aware of how formal the setting felt. At 34, he had built an empire in commercial real estate, transforming forgotten properties into thriving spaces. Success had brought him wealth, but it also taught him to be cautious about people's intentions. Yet something about Gabriella's straightforward gaze made him want to lower his usual defenses. "Please, call me Lucas," he replied, his hand engulfing hers in a warm handshake that lasted a moment longer than strictly professional. "I hope the journey wasn't too difficult. Let me show you around the property." Discovering the estate. As they walked through the grounds, Lucas found himself talking more than usual. He pointed out the herb garden where he hoped she would find fresh ingredients, the greenhouse that provided vegetables year-round, and the outdoor kitchen he had designed for summer entertaining. Gabriella listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that revealed her passion for cooking and her appreciation for quality ingredients. "This garden is incredible," she said, kneeling beside a bed of heirloom tomatoes. She touched the leaves gently as if greeting old friends. "You can taste the difference when vegetables are grown with this much care." Lucas watched her, captivated by her unself-conscious enthusiasm. Most people who visited his estate commented on its monetary value or tried to impress him with their knowledge of luxury. Gabriella simply appreciated the beauty and potential before her. It was refreshing in a way that caught him completely off guard. The main kitchen was a chef's paradise, with professional-grade appliances, marble countertops, and a view of the mountains through expansive windows. Gabriella's eyes widened as she took it all in, her fingers trailing along the smooth surfaces with reverence. "I promise to take excellent care of all this," she said quietly, turning to face him. "Cooking isn't just a job for me, it's how I show care for people." Something in her words struck deep. Lucas had spent years surrounding himself with the finest things, but he couldn't remember the last time someone had spoken about caring for people rather than things. He cleared his throat, suddenly feeling emotions he had long kept buried. The first evening. That evening, Lucas sat in his dining room, a space that usually felt too large and too quiet. He had told Gabriella to prepare whatever she felt comfortable making, not wanting to pressure her on her first day. The aroma that began drifting from the kitchen was intoxicating. Garlic, herbs, and something sweet that made his mouth water. When Gabriella emerged carrying a tray, her cheeks were flushed from the heat of the stove, and there was a nervousness in her movements that he found endearing. She had prepared a simple meal: herb-crusted chicken with roasted root vegetables, a fresh salad with homemade vinaigrette, and warm bread that filled the room with its comforting scent. "I kept it straightforward for tonight," she explained, setting the plate before him. "I wanted to understand your preferences before trying anything too elaborate." He took his first bite and closed his eyes. The flavors were perfectly balanced, the chicken tender and flavorful, the vegetables caramelized to perfection. But it was more than just good cooking. There was love in this food, attention and care that transformed simple ingredients into something that nourished more than just the body. "This is exceptional, Gabriella," he said, meeting her anxious gaze. "Truly exceptional." The smile that bloomed across her face was like sunshine breaking through clouds. She excused herself back to the kitchen, but Lucas noticed how she paused at the doorway, glancing back at him with something that looked like curiosity mixed with something else he couldn't quite name. As he finished his meal alone in the vast dining room, Lucas realized that his carefully ordered life had just become significantly more complicated. Gabriella Torres was not just an excellent cook. She was someone who might actually see past his wealth and reputation to the man underneath, and that possibility was both terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. The first rays of dawn painted the kitchen in shades of gold and amber as Gabriella moved quietly through her morning routine. She had discovered that Lucas was an early riser, often appearing in the kitchen by 6:30 for his first coffee. What started as a professional courtesy had evolved into something she looked forward to more than she cared to admit. This particular morning, she was preparing fresh cinnamon rolls, the dough rising perfectly under a clean cloth. The coffee maker gurgled softly, filling the air with its rich aroma. She had learned that Lucas preferred his coffee black and strong, a reflection of his straightforward personality that she was beginning to understand and appreciate. "Something smells amazing." His voice came from the doorway, making her jump slightly. She turned to find him leaning against the frame, dressed in casual jeans and a gray sweater that made his blue eyes even more striking. His hair was slightly damp from his morning shower, and there was a softness to his expression that he rarely showed during business hours. "Good morning," Gabriella said, feeling her cheeks warm under his gaze. "I thought I would try something different today. The rolls should be ready in about 15 minutes. Lucas moved into the kitchen with easy familiarity, pouring himself coffee from the pot she had prepared. Over the past 3 weeks, this space had become their unofficial meeting ground, a place where the boundaries between employer and employee seemed to blur into something more comfortable and natural. "You know, you don't have to wake up this early every day," Lucas said, settling onto one of the bar stools at the kitchen island. "I'm perfectly capable of making my own coffee." Gabriella smiled as she checked the oven temperature. "I enjoy it. Besides, cooking for someone who actually appreciates the food makes all the difference. Most of my previous employers barely noticed what they were eating." Shared moments. As days turned into weeks, their morning conversations became the highlight of both their routines. Lucas found himself sharing stories about his childhood, growing up as the son of a construction worker who had taught him the value of hard work and integrity. Gabriella spoke about her late parents, her younger brother Timothy, who was studying engineering, and her dream of one day opening a small restaurant where people felt welcomed and cared for. One rainy afternoon, Lucas found Gabriella in the library, curled up in one of the leather armchairs with a cookbook. She looked up, startled, as if she had been caught doing something forbidden. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to intrude," she said quickly, starting to rise. "Mrs. Patterson said I could use the library during my free time, but if you need privacy—" "Stay," Lucas said, perhaps more firmly than he intended. He softened his tone. "Please, this room is meant to be used. What are you reading?" Gabriella held up the book, a worn copy of a French culinary guide. I'm trying to improve my technique with classic sauces. I thought maybe I could prepare something special for your dinner party next week." Lucas had almost forgotten about the business dinner he had scheduled with potential investors. Normally, he would have hired an outside catering service, but the thought of Gabriella's cooking gracing his table filled him with unexpected pride. "You don't have to go to extra trouble," he said, sitting in the chair across from her. "But if you want to, I trust your judgment completely." The words hung in the air between them, carrying more weight than a simple comment about meal planning. Gabriella met his eyes, and something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of the growing connection neither had the courage to name. Protective instincts. The dinner party arrived, and Gabriella had outdone herself. She prepared a 5-course meal that showcased both technical skill and creative flair. Lucas watched his guests' reactions with satisfaction, but his attention kept drifting to the kitchen, where Gabriella worked with focused intensity, her assistant helping plate each course to perfection. One of the investors, a man named Richard Thornton, had drunk too much wine and became overly familiar. As Gabriella cleared the dessert plates, Richard grabbed Gabriella's wrist, making some inappropriate comment about her beauty being the best part of the meal. Lucas was on his feet instantly, his voice cutting through the conversation like ice. "Richard, I think you've had enough for tonight. Apologize to Miss Torres, and then I suggest you call for your car." The room fell silent. Everyone knew Lucas Whitmore's reputation for being tough but fair in business. However, the protective fury in his eyes at that moment revealed something deeper and more personal. Richard stammered an apology, his face flushed with embarrassment and alcohol. Within minutes, he had left, and the party dissolved shortly after. Gabriella stood in the kitchen doorway, shaken by the incident, but also touched by Lucas's immediate defense of her dignity. When the last guest had departed, Lucas found her cleaning up, her movements mechanical and distant. "Are you all right?" he asked softly, keeping a respectful distance despite his desire to comfort her. "I'm fine," she replied, though her voice trembled slightly. "Thank you for what you did. You didn't have to." "Yes, I did," Lucas said firmly. He moved closer, and this time she didn't step away. "Gabriella, I want you to know that you're not just an employee here. You're valued, respected, and under my protection. No one treats you that way in my home or anywhere else." The intensity in his words made her breath catch. She looked up at him, seeing past the successful businessman to the honorable man beneath him. Without thinking, she reached out and touched his arm gently. "Lucas, I need to tell you something," she began, but her words were interrupted by the sharp ring of his phone. Unsettling discovery. The phone call was brief but clearly urgent. Lucas's expression darkened as he listened, his jaw tightening with each passing second. When he ended the call, he looked at Gabriella with an expression that mixed regret and something that looked like fear. "I have to go handle something," he said abruptly. "It's a business matter that requires immediate attention. I might be gone for a few days." "Of course," Gabriella said, confused by his sudden change in demeanor. "Is everything all right?" "It will be," he said, but the words sounded hollow. He hesitated, as if wanting to say more, then simply touched her shoulder briefly before striding out of the kitchen. Over the next 2 days, the house felt empty without Lucas's presence. Mrs. Patterson was tight-lipped about where he had gone, saying only that he would return when the matter was resolved. Gabriella tried to focus on her work, but worry gnawed at her. On the 3rd evening, unable to sleep, Gabriella went to Lucas's study to find a book. She wasn't snooping, not intentionally, but a folder on his desk caught her eye. It had fallen open, revealing newspaper clippings and legal documents. Her heart sank as she recognized names and dates. The articles detailed a corporate scandal from 5 years ago. A real estate development had collapsed, leaving dozens of families homeless and investors bankrupt. Though the charges had been dropped, the implications were devastating. Gabriella's hands trembled as she read. Was everything she thought she knew about Lucas a lie? Had she fallen for a man whose fortune was built on the suffering of others? The protective nature she had admired now seemed sinister, his generosity a way to buy loyalty in silence. When Lucas returned the next morning, she found Gabriella in the kitchen, the folder on the counter between them. His face paled when he saw what she had discovered. "Gabriella, I can explain," he began, but she held up her hand. "I need to know the truth," she said, her voice barely above a whisper.
all of it. The moment hung between them, heavy with unspoken emotions and the weight of revelations yet to come.
Lucas stood frozen in the doorway of his kitchen, the space that had become their sanctuary now feeling like a courtroom. The folder on the counter represented his worst nightmare, the past he had worked so hard to overcome now exposed to the one person whose opinion mattered more than anyone else's. "Please sit down," he said quietly, his voice heavy with resignation. "You deserve to know everything, and I should have told you before now." Gabriella remained standing, her arms crossed protectively over her chest. The warmth that usually lit her eyes had been replaced by a guarded caution that broke his heart. Still, she nodded, and they both sat at the kitchen island where they had shared so many morning conversations. Lucas took a deep breath, his hands clasped tightly on the marble surface. "5 years ago, I was a different person, ambitious, ruthless even. I had partnered with a man named Vincent Castellano on a major development project. We were building affordable housing units, or at least that's what the project was supposed to be." He paused, the memories clearly painful. Gabriella watched him, her journalist instincts warring with the feelings she had developed for this man. "Vincent was cutting corners I didn't know about," Lucas continued, his voice thick with emotion, "using substandard materials, bribing inspectors, falsifying safety reports. When I discovered what was happening, I threatened to go public. That's when he framed me, made it look like I was the mastermind behind the entire scheme." The unraveling truth. Gabriella listened as Lucas explained how the project had collapsed during construction, how families who had put deposits on their future homes lost everything, how investors suffered massive losses. His voice cracked when he described the elderly couple who had invested their life savings and lost it all. "The charges against me were eventually dropped because I had documentation proving my innocence," Lucas said, pulling out his phone and showing her detailed files he had kept. "But the damage was done. My reputation was destroyed. People still believed I was guilty, that I had simply bought my way out of consequences." He stood and walked to the window, his back to her as he continued. "I spent the next 3 years tracking down every single person who lost money because of Vincent's fraud. I liquidated most of my assets, sold properties, cashed in investments. I personally repaid every penny that was lost, with interest." Gabriella's breath caught. "Every penny?" "Every single one," Lucas confirmed, turning to face her. "The elderly couple I mentioned, the Harrisons, they're living comfortably now in a home I helped them purchase. The families who lost their deposits, I tracked down each one and made sure they were compensated. It took everything I had built, but it was the right thing to do." He returned to sit across from her, his eyes meeting hers with raw honesty. "I rebuilt my business from almost nothing, but this time I did it differently. Every project I take on now, I personally oversee. I pay my workers above market rate, use only the best materials, and I've established a foundation that helps families achieve home ownership." The missing piece. Gabriella felt her carefully constructed wall of doubt beginning to crumble. "The phone call the other night," she said slowly. "What was that about?" Lucas's expression darkened. "Vincent Castellano was released from prison. He served 3 years for fraud and several other charges. He's been threatening me, trying to extort money by claiming he has evidence that could destroy my rebuilt reputation. That's where I was, meeting with my lawyers and the authorities to handle the situation properly." He reached across the counter, not quite touching her hand, but close enough that she could feel the warmth. "I've been keeping a low profile, living quietly here instead of in the city because I didn't want to draw attention. I wanted to prove through actions, not words, that I had changed. When you arrived, I was terrified that you would eventually discover my past and believe the lies instead of the truth." Gabriella looked down at the folder, then back at Lucas. Her mind raced through all their interactions, seeing them now through a different lens. His generosity toward the staff, his insistence on quality and integrity, his protective nature.
It all made sense now. This wasn't a man hiding guilt. This was a man who had fought to reclaim his honor. "Why didn't you tell me before?" she asked softly. "Because I was falling in love with you," Lucas admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "And I was terrified that the truth would drive you away before you had a chance to know the real me." The confession hung in the air between them. Gabriella felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes, overwhelmed by the weight of everything she had learned. She thought about the man she had come to know over the past weeks, the one who appeared in the kitchen each morning with a genuine smile, who listened to her stories with real interest, who defended her honor without hesitation. "I need to show you something," Lucas said, pulling out a worn notebook from a drawer. "This is a list of every person affected by that project. Next to each name is a check mark showing they've been fully compensated and a note about how they're doing now. I keep it as a reminder of why integrity matters more than profit." Gabriella took the notebook, her hands trembling as she flipped through pages filled with names, addresses, and handwritten notes. Some entries brought tears to her eyes. The Morrison family welcomed their third child in their new home. Mr. Chen opened his restaurant, sent me an invitation to the grand opening. The Patel sisters both graduated college, sent thank you cards. This wasn't the record of a guilty man. This was the journal of someone who had taken responsibility